Welcome to Safety Talk. Personal safety expert Pete Canavan shares his insights and interviews experts who provide simple and effective tips, techniques, and technologies to keep you safe and secure both online and off. Here's Pete.
Hello and welcome to Safety Talk. I'm your host and personal safety expert, Pete Canavan. And as always, we welcome you to the show and start off with a little bit of safety and security news. Today, I wanted to focus on cybersecurity because we're seeing so much in the news today on the various threats to our safety that come from online threats. And, on this show, we talk about online threats. We also talk about offline threats. So today's bit of safety news, as I said, involves the latest cybersecurity threats. And one that has recently just been brought to our attention here in the States, although it affects more people in other countries, is a new exploit that is using an older form of mobile phone software that has a potential to affect hundreds of millions of people, mostly in South America and some other countries, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, about 30 countries total. It's called the SIMjacker exploit. And basically what it allows hackers to do is send secret texts to the SIM cards in these phones that respond with information about the phone, about the user, and as well as their location. So obviously that's not good. If it's somebody that's looking to rob an individual, they know if they're not home or they know where they are. And I mean, it opens up all kinds of potential for problems and kidnapping and everything else. So that's one really, really bad thing that affects a lot of people. And as if that wasn't bad enough, we all see how cybersecurity is in the news so much. And it really the cost that the blow that it deals to businesses in terms of financial loss is huge. And the latest report from a company called Aon on the impact of cyber attacks states that the annual losses by next year, 2021, are poised to reach about $6 trillion worldwide by next year, 2021. So that is just a ridiculous amount of money. And it just goes to show that this is a huge threat. It affects companies all over the world. But the key is, we need to understand that the worst case scenarios that it can occur and the impact that they have to business, because that is absolutely crucial to understanding what can happen as well as how to develop an effective strategy to combat these cyber attacks and these cyber criminals. So to learn more about that, you can, and how to develop a cybersecurity plan for your business, I have developed a free webinar anybody can go to and learn a little bit about that. It basically breaks it into 7 steps. It's a free webinar on how to do it. You can go to bit.ly.com/free cybersecurity training. So that's free for anybody. Now, I'm going to introduce today's guest as we get away from the news and onto our current guest here. And our guest today grew up believing that, as many of us do, that if she was nice and she worked hard, that things were just kind of, going to work out just fine. But, that's not the whole story, as we all sort of figure out as life goes on. She has a very impressive professional resume. Her education in physics and math brought her first professional position by knowing more about quantum mechanics than anyone else. So, but she quickly found out that bullies and harassers and even predators existed in the professional world, and she needed a system to stop them, and also to gain the respect of her peers and the executives that she was working with. So her career has spanned developing industry standards in systems engineering for military systems with the Department of Defense, to turning around select military projects while she was working with Texas Instruments. And so, in this male-dominated world, she learned that, she had to earn their respect and how to deal with all types of men, both good and bad. So she has led international teams at Fortune 50 companies. She's consulted with private firms. And by dealing with boundaries and by dealing with various professionals at these different companies, she's learned how to use those boundaries to give freedom and confidence to both men and women by increasing their productivity when the tensions between them melt away. And, that's a huge ability right there. And so she helps her clients get confident and, own their own space, get rid of the bullies, banish them, and to gain the respect and the opportunity that they crave. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Dorothy Kuhn to Safety Talk. Welcome, Dorothy. Thanks for being with us.
It's great to be here, Pete. Just wonderful.
That's awesome. So thanks so much. You've done a lot in your professional career, but wasn't without a host of challenges that you initially weren't really prepared for, I would assume, right?
One of the things that is true for us is that we can be shocked by other people from time to time. I know you've never had that
Oh,
experience.
no, never.
Yeah, and so you want me to tell a story?
Absolutely. Stories are good.
So so one of the first times, the very first time that I ever remember doing what I've come to call my SABRE method is when my little brothers, we used to like run around in the woods. I was the oldest. I had two younger brothers, and they tried like sticking a bug in my face. Now I'm like the nature girl. I love being in the woods, and there is no critter that strikes fear in my heart. So I would just grab that bug and say, "Hey, I like this one. Bring me another."
A little reverse psychology.
Do it. They would do it. And when I started, the challenges that we get, and this is true of any human, breathing heart. We all get challenges in life, and this method, works for anybody because it's really built on how it is that we size people up like that, and what meaning we're going to make out of that interaction. And, I understand that there are a lot of people in the military and in business here, and we know that there's that whole, you got to hold your space.
Absolutely.
You got to show dominance, and you don't have to be a jerk about it, but you do have to be solid.
So what was it that sort of made you say, you know what, I need to find a better way. I need to figure this out so that I can advance myself and my career and help everybody get along and basically, become more successful?
Well, when you think you're smart and you ought to do well and things aren't working out for you, you have to, look within, because it isn't the other people who is making that happen.
That's true.
And so I just went inside and thought, what do I need to do to build respect? And I didn't get an answer right away, but I tell you what, sometimes, the divine will give you a challenge that will provide the answer. So the story that comes to mind on this was a little bit later. I was in undergraduate school in physics and math because I really am a geek. And I was working at the Denny's on the highway. So, Saturday morning, and there were these four guys that came in. They were kind of dressed in business suits. They were in their, upper 20s, maybe. I was still in college, so I was about 21. And it looked like they were going to be going off to maybe a sales training meeting just in a little while. They were grabbing breakfast. So there were three guys that were just, normal, easy to get along with guys, and the bad boy was sitting on the end. And he was just talking smack and about just anything that crossed his field of view. And I just let that stuff go. I took their orders, and as I'm bringing them back, I'm going to serve this fellow first, and the plate is mid-air, and he says something that intimates some of my body parts should be on that plate. I looked at that man. I looked at him hard. I had no idea, Pete, what I was going to do. I took a deep breath. This is magical. Took a deep breath. All attention was on me because I was calm. I was breathing slowly. And, I had him fixed in my eyes. And I took another breath. And these are the words that came out of my mouth. How'd you like to eat this plate and all? Because the plate was right in front of him, and I could have, but I didn't even want to.
Oh, that's good.
So it was, that's exactly the response that the other three guys had. They just busted out laughing. They were high-fiving one another and the whole bit. So you give people an opportunity to be an ally, and they're happy to be.
It's unfortunate we do have to deal with people like that all the time. And it's, there's always one, right? There's always one. And, you can get along with so many people, but then there's always that one person that has to make life difficult. They have to be, whether they're being a bully, whether they're just infringing upon your, who you are and, maybe insulting you or saying, things that really they had no business saying, like that guy. It's like, what do you do? So, is that something that sort of, you talk about this, kind of boundaries without blame. And, we have these boundaries, and I talk about boundaries in my college safety book quite a bit. And we'll get into that a little bit, but you have something called the 13-second rule, boundaries without blame. What is that?
I do. So the 13-second rule is really that it never takes more than, it's the longest it's ever taken me to turn a tough situation around was 13 seconds.
That's pretty good.
And it's not only empirically true, it's really important, because that part of your brain that makes the I'm going to respect you, I'm going to disrespect you decision is the part of your brain that is right next to the part that says there's something in front of me. Am I going to eat it? Am I going to kill it? Am I going to run away from it? Or in the sense that the species must go forward, am I going to mate with it? We're not doing that here.
So it's primal, basically, is what you're saying.
It's primal. It only asks those 4 questions. So, and it sizes everything up like that. That part of your brain, your brainstem, is the fastest processor. And we've all had that experience of a dawning awareness of something. Like, oh, that's what they meant, or something that way, right?
So can you give us an example of how that would apply to something, the 13 seconds?
The 13-second rule. Oh, well, the Denny's on the highway was
okay.
one. I'll give you one that is like close quarters, really close quarters. So I'm in an online community group. This is a couple years ago. And there was this fellow and his wife who were in there too. They were lovely, but we hadn't met in person. And our group decided to do a float for the Independence Day parade. And so I meet him here. There at the event that morning. We're all there to do the final assembly. We hadn't met before. And so we do that friendly, Rotarian A-frame hug. I'm sure you do that in your club too, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, as we finish the hug, his hand drops down and gives me the on the derriere. I slammed my face right up close to his nose, grabbed that forearm like a vice. I slapped his hand right around on the small of my back above the waistline. And I said, this is the extent to which a gentleman limits the roam of his hands. Now show me what you got on this float. And he did.
And that was the end of it.
And that was the end of it. I didn't blame him. I didn't shame him. And we never talked about it again. We've been good friends ever since.
So would you say that then the bottom line in something like that, where it's an uncomfortable situation, that you've got to assert yourself immediately so that they don't feel like they can do it again and again and again?
That's
and
right.
So I know a lot of people are saying, yeah, okay, that sounds great, right? But some people don't have the confidence to do that. Some people don't have the ability to do that, because they think, oh, well, if I do this, is that going to reflect badly on me? Is this person, my boss? Is it somebody that can advance my career? I mean, we've seen this whole thing that's gone over the last, I guess probably a couple of years now, with this whole Hollywood thing, with all of these guys dropping like flies because of the whole, Hollywood couch thing. But what would you say to women or men that feel they're being harassed, but they don't have the confidence to do what you did, because it takes a certain person to be able to be like, hey, what are you, and deal with the situation immediately.
So this is a great question. I love this question, and in the work that I do primarily with women is to do that inner work, to do that, because if you don't feel safe, you won't believe you can, and then you can't even make yourself do it if you wanted to. And so, what the course is about is expanding your authentic range of how you show up. I did not always show up as the way I do now. I've had a lifetime of experience to learn from, and unfortunately, in my case, there were long years where those victory stories that I told were not happening at all, particularly in one. And this can be very contextual for people. I had those wonderful wins and really built respect in my professional life, but in my personal life, honey, it was just not that way.
Hmm.
And
So,
I didn't know what to do about it. And so the getting to a place, where you do know what to do, and that's what the course is all about.
so what was the thing that sort of flipped that switch for you? Because I'm sure a lot of people will be like, I'd love to be able to identify what that is.
So, and when you say flip that switch, which context are you thinking of?
Well, from someone who felt that they weren't able to respond in a definitive way to someone that has the confidence to be able to respond in a manner that is going to be congruent with them asserting themselves over someone who is making them feel uncomfortable.
That's I get that. Well, in my case, what I did was I started cleaning up, and this is what so many of us need to do. You certainly benefit from doing it. Is to clean up those childhood. I'd fallen. It was in a marriage situation, and we're good friends now. Because I've cleaned up all my stuff, and I don't let him trigger me and run me around.
You're talking about your ex-husband?
Yeah,
Okay.
And he's a fine fellow. We were just a really, really bad match, and we brought out kind of the worst in one another. And my worst was to shrink back because I didn't know how to deal with the verbal kind of, destatting. This can go on in a work setting, in a social setting. And when you don't know how to deal with these things, it's almost always because there's something that's holding you back. You feel too unsafe. And cleaning up those past experiences that are still fresh in your memory is how we get from a place where we're too afraid to do something to a place where we can step out and do it even imperfectly the first time and then go from there.
Very well put. Everybody has that personal breaking point, right? Where they decide is enough is enough. The problem that I found in my training with people in martial arts and self-defense is that most people never, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in that sort of situation, but in many situations, people don't know how much is enough. And so until that we define that, what is that invisible line in the sand that if somebody crosses it, we need to know how we're going to react. And if you've never thought about that in the past, you have no idea how to react. And you may overreact, you may underreact. But the bottom line is you haven't thought about it before. So it puts you in a position of, what do I do? Like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, how do I respond to this?
Yeah,
and so
shock, and you're back on your heels.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, you could be being harassed. You could be being embarrassed. Somebody's making fun of you. You could be mentally tormented. You could be physically abused. There could be anything could be happening to you, but you have to know what those boundaries are and what that personal space involves so that we can say, look, this is my limit. And when somebody steps over that line, I'm going to make sure that I quickly and definitively assert myself and let them know that this is unwanted, this is, unacceptable, or, whatever the situation happens to be.
Without making them the bad person, because all of us believe we're good, and occasionally we do stupid things, right?
Absolutely.
And so if you turn that around from being when somebody breaches a boundary, and maybe one that you haven't thought about before, these are especially, then you can always tell that there's a boundary that you're not in touch with, that when you're back on your heels, like they gave you, and you're just, oh my God, where did that come from? Or, you're tempted to like lean into them and rah, 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 like Fred Flintstone or something. But that's just take that. The number one thing to do with a situation like that is to say thank you for helping me notice. Whoever you thank in your worldview of spirituality, thank and be grateful that you noticed, and then ask yourself, what were you feeling? What story in your history came from deep within you that informed that reaction? If you were scared of a big adult in your childhood who was loud and sometimes not so friendly, then you would, somebody who comes across that way would put you back on your heels, just make you want to run away in some way.
Well, sure, because
like
it kind of takes you back there.
Yeah.
So after the situation's kind of past, you have to go back and say to yourself, now, wow, where did that come from? I never had that experience before. How am I going to deal with that going forward in the future? Right. Because it could happen again. Like you said, it could be a situation you never even thought of, and all of a sudden here it is front and center, and you're woefully unprepared because you've never thought about it before. And so that's a tough situation to be in.
Yeah, I mean, look at life, and this is my fundamental perspective on life. Everything is perfect. It's either turned out the way I wanted it to turn out, or it's a wonderful learning opportunity. And when you look at your life that way, you will automatically be more optimistic, more confident, and better, because you will build your problem-solving skills and have a really great time doing it.
Yeah, and it can be tough to do, but having the right attitude, having the right perspective, having the right mindset is something that people need to have, because without it, it's easy for you to get pulled down into that downward spiral where, negativity breeds more negativity, and you start to think badly of yourself. You think poorly of yourself. You think, I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this, blah, 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 blah. And it goes worse and worse. So looking at things, like you said, even something bad, which is hard to do, especially at the time, but I mean, later on, something that happens that may not have been ideal, go back and take a look at it and assess it and say, hey, how can I learn from this? What is this taught me, and how can I prevent this from happening again? Because the worst thing we want to have happen is to make a mistake or have something happen, not do anything about it, and then have it happen again.
Yeah, exactly. And to not focus just on the interaction, but what is the thinking that led to that interaction? So, Gary Kasparov, the brilliant chess player, when he was doing all of those tremendous competitions, and he would make a move that didn't turn out the way he expected things to turn out. He was such a brilliant guy. He would ask this question. It's not he wouldn't say what kind of a beginner level thinker in strategy would say, which is, don't make that kind of move in that situation again. The question that he would ask would, and this is the question I train all of my clients to ask, and I'll give you an example in a minute if you like, but to ask yourself, what was I thinking that led me to not expect this moment? What was I thinking to not respond to this moment? And what was I thinking, or what could I think instead? Those three questions are just magical questions to be able to get you to a place where you can think more strategically and see those early warning signs before the happens more often.
Sure. So take that and kind of take yourself back there, go back in time and be like, okay, what was going on that put me there, or caused that decision to be made? And now, obviously 2020 hindsight, right? Hindsight's 2020. You go back, it's like, oh, geez, it's easy to see now. But at the time, I wasn't able to make the right decision. And so why did that happen? And so I see what you're saying,
And I'll give you an example from a client that I have. Most of my clients are women, but this happened to be a man. And he had a really unfortunate interaction that he did not intend at all. Just like all of us reasonable, human beings, he thinks of himself as a good man. And overall, he is. But, we make mistakes from time to time. He was just horrified with how things turned out. So he had been corresponding over, internet with a woman, and then he went to visit for that first in-person visit with intention to woo her, which is always wonderful and romantic. Well, I say always. It's intended to be wonderful and romantic.
Supposed to be.
Most of it.
Supposed to be.
And one of the things that they done, and I don't know who started this joke, but in their, they were kind of snappy reparteeing with one another, and a phrase that would come up when they were being particularly cheeky with one another is to say, I should slap you for that. Well, that's fine over the internet when you're far, far away and there's no opportunity for that to happen. But in person, when you've been saying something like that, you've opened the door in your mind, in the deep part of your mind, that slapping is a feature of this relationship.
Okay, I see where you're going.
So when they got together, they were, visiting for a week. And when they got together, somehow in the interaction, she said or did something where he said that phrase that they had been saying to one another through all this time. And he touched her on the cheek in a way that felt to her like a slap. For him, he meant it as he described it later as he did touch her skin, harder than he intended to, but he didn't intend to do any harm. And so you can see what a difficult situation this is, right? And things just evolved from there. There was a do not come near the property kind of filing with the local authorities and, all that kind of stuff. He
went downhill real fast.
Oh, real fast. And she did, had to, testify, well, not testify because it wasn't anything that made it legal. It was just an administrative thing. To state that she didn't feel safe around him. She was, surprised. It's clearly a personal space kind of boundary. Mm-hmm. And he was probably just moving a little faster than she was ready to move. Again, boundaries that we can't see, right?
And this is where I talk about this a lot, in the fact that we have these threats that can be online, mm-hmm. benign or real, that can then move offline. And so here's something where it was kind of something being said in fun and being said in jest, like, oh man, I could slap you for that, which is just something kind of off the cuff. Yeah, okay, yeah, whatever, Mm-hmm. But in person, right, now that it's come offline and you're interacting with somebody, it's like, man, I could slap you for that. You just kind of give them a little love tap, and they perceive that to be completely in a different light, and like, because, oh my God, this person could be an abuser. They could be somebody that maybe I should be afraid of. What was I thinking meeting this person mm-hmm. online? I should have recognized all these warning signs. They kept saying I should slap you for that over and over again. Now they're in person. Oh my God, I'm scared. Right? Yeah. So it can go from one thing to another very, very rapidly. And, mm-hmm. That's one reason why we have to be so careful about what we're saying, both online and offline, but how things can be misconstrued mm-hmm. when they're said in two different environments, even though we're saying the exact same thing.
Yes, and context is absolutely key.
And each person's different, right? How I say something to you versus how I say something to somebody else versus the next person. Each person could interpret what I'm saying slightly differently.
And they will.
And they absolutely will.
Because we all have our perspective. And guess what? There's 7.5, 8 billion of us now. We've all got a different perspective and nobody's going to have yours. Yep.
And I mean, the first thing that I think, and you explained this and gave a good example when you're talking about your waitressing experience, is how you remained calm. Somebody was insulting you, you could have flown off the handle and gone crazy and screamed, but you stayed calm. That's absolutely the right thing. The first thing you need to do is you need to stay calm, sort of assess the situation, say, okay, what is going on here? Because by lashing out, that could cause a rebound effect that's even worse. And so it may be very difficult for us to do, but we've got to think things through, right? It can't be that this is the way I'm going to react and this is the only way to react without thinking about what potential repercussions could occur based on those actions that you're taking out of anger and just because you haven't thought things through. And so that can end up being really, really bad, or it can end up being not so bad, but the same sort of philosophy applies, which is you have to realize what you're doing, take a look at the context, take a look at the situation, and try to think of the words before you say them. I know I have a problem with this sometimes. You say things before you think and you go, oh man, I wish I didn't say that. Sometimes happens with my wife. She'll get real happy about it.
What was
Sorry,
that?
honey.
I could have had a V8.
Yeah, I remember those commercials. But that's it's kind of the same thing. You say something, you go, "Oh, what did I think?" And so it's tough because in different environments, there are always going to be different levels of acceptability, and there are
Right.
always going to be different levels of how we interact with each other as members of the same sex, and then of course as members as the opposite sex. You obviously have different parameters in terms of what you can say, what you can do, how close you can be, how you can touch, or not, or whatever. And these things are all,
Hmm.
they vary from country to country. They
Oh,
vary
they
from person to person.
Yeah, in
You
South
touch a
America, close quarters is really close. Like, just a very few inches away. Here in North America, we've got this like 3 foot arm's length kind of thing going.
hmm And the other thing I think it's really important. I'm sure you'll agree, Dorothy, is to really listen to what the other person is saying,
Hmm.
because you may think you're hearing what they're saying,
Hmm.
but they may actually be saying something that is not what you're interpreting it to be. And so it's
Right.
important to
Uh-huh.
look at the context of the conversation and of the situation to say, are they calm? Are they
Hmm.
agitated? Are they shouting? Are they
Hmm.
screaming? Are
Yeah.
they rocking back and forth, or are they just kind of being matter of fact? So, I mean, you
Right.
got to be really, really aware of all of
Right.
these things that could
Yeah,
potentially
the whole situation,
escalate.
physical situation. What's the environment there? Where are physical things located in the space? What's that distance? And how are they showing up? And always feel free to check in with people and say, well, what do you mean by that?
hmm
That's a really good thing. If you're just not clear about the communication, or if you are preparing to respond while they are still talking, always instead just take a breath, listen to their words, and then ask if they're using kind of abstract terms like we and all and they and things like that. Ask for, what do you mean by them, or what do you mean by they?
And what you said too is about feeling, is use the old feel felt,
Hmm.
right? It's like, oh, I understand how you feel. I felt that same way.
Yeah.
And it immediately sort of bridges the gap between the two of you, because you're letting them know, look, man, I understand you're upset. I felt the same way. May not have been the same reason, but you know what? I get it. How can
Right.
we sort of diffuse the situation if it can be diffused? If it can't be diffused, then you go to the other side of the coin, which is the self-defense and protect yourself. So if it gets to that
Definitely,
point,
definitely.
and
And
unfortunately,
that
it can
kind
get
of
to that.
stuff,
But
that kind of stuff is just great. That fast action works in any, even if it's in a physical environment like that, hand sliding down a little too far
hmm
situation. That's kind of a mild version of that. I like to think of the my metaphor of special forces. They're out, in wild terrain. They've got a bit of land to protect, and they know what their perimeter is. And boundaries is knowing what our perimeters are.
absolutely, we need
And
to know that.
right,
So
and if
what?
something is coming across, they are going to close distance and shut it down. And when you shut it down with honor, then they may not like what you did, but they will respect you for it, and that is worth money in the bank.
Yeah, that's a very, very big and important distinction right there. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So along the way, obviously, you've been utilizing some of these things that we're talking about here throughout your career. Uh, Along the way, there had to have been things that you were asking yourself. What might some of those questions be that you're asking yourself? Like what sort of helped you get more clear
Mhm.
on what you basically needed to do?
I came to a place where I was just so miserable. Like I I was a big church lady, and very involved with my church, and very involved in my faith. And it wasn't, I would see other people appear to have these wonderful transformations, and that wouldn't happen for me. So, I tried, I read a bunch of books, and they were helpful intellectually, but there was so much stuff that, you remember, geek, have a tendency to live in my head, and I was so much of that feeling stuff that I had pushed down so much that I needed to really do that kind of excavation work. And so when I realized that what I didn't need was a second master's degree, I needed to do something with Dorothy, my relationship with myself. When you come to that realization that, oh, this is, I don't know what that direction is, but I know it's that way, then you will start noticing the things. And you, dear listener, dear viewer, may be in a space where you are listening to any one of Pete's shows, and they are, they speak to you. Well, connect with Pete, connect with his guest, so that you can, that is the inner part of your heart and soul telling you, ding, 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 this is the direction that can get you that next best step forward. And whatever that is for you, when you recognize it in yourself that, oh, this is what I wonder about. This is what I know is missing in my life. Then you'll start noticing it. Just like that new car that you had never bought that model before and never really noticed it on the road. But, as soon as you buy that new model that you've never noticed before, you see that car everywhere on the road, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And recognition is huge, because we all are at different points in our life, and professionally, personally, and everywhere in between, with our families, with our friends, with our coworkers, with our clients, with, everybody, that, I think the older we get, obviously the wiser we get, but we also are more stuck in our ways. And it's kind of like, I've always done it this way. Why should I change now? But I think it's also a sign of maturity that at some point we realize, what, there is a better way, or I'm not getting the results that I want. And why is that? What's the common denominator, right? Yeah. And of course, the common denominator is each individual one of us is that common denominator in all of those different situations. And sometimes it hurts to have to take that long, hard look inside of ourselves and say, what, is there something that is preventing me from achieving the things that I set out to achieve? Is there something that is blocking my ability to move forward in certain directions and achieve certain things? And it's not an easy conversation to have with yourself, right? Because we all think, it's not me. It's got to be, that person or this person, or it's because this happened or that happened. And it's a very, very hard thing to do. And I think the vast majority of people, unfortunately, never do that. They never take that deep look within, unless there's someone who, I don't like using the term meditate, because it conjures up, somebody sitting in a room going, and that's not what meditation necessarily is. It's simply internal reflection and quiet, and setting some time aside, 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, to just think in the quiet about you and who you are and what you want to achieve, and why are things happening a certain way or not happening a certain way. And it's amazing the amount of clarity that you can get in a very short period of time. But you got to start, you can't just do it like once or twice and think it's going to fix things, right? You've got to do it consistently, and it may take a few weeks. I tell people you can change your life in 30 days. You do that, take 10, 15 minutes and focus on the things that you want and you want to achieve for 30 days, and you won't recognize your life at the end of that month. And people think, how's that possible? It's like, well, talk to me in 30 days after you do it, and we'll talk about it then. And you know what? Most people never do it, because they think it's either not, it's just some mumbo jumbo, or they think it can't possibly work. But the ones that actually go and do it are amazed by the results. I mean, I do it in my own life. I've had other people that have, I've told, look, just do this, and you're not going to recognize the change in yourself. Yeah. And it's very empowering. We talk a little bit about, empowerment and how we want to empower people, because, and we're going to be closing on that in a few minutes, so I don't want to get there yet, but we can start talking about that is, so, asking your questions along the way, which then sort of does lead to the ability to be empowered, right? And so as a woman, what is your position on empowering women?
I think that every adult, the right privilege and honor of every adult is to chart her or his own course in life and be the best person you were made to be.
Absolutely. And that
So
every single person deserves that. Every
that's
single person deserves it.
That's right. And so, for me, it was cleaning up those things in all my clients, because we are all human. I don't have any non-human clients, I promise. And we all got something to clean up. For me, it was this huge ball of isolation from when I was little. My dad was the PTSD military guy. Well, I'm a little kid. I love my father. I love my mother. But I had no idea why things felt so distant, so cold, so tense all the time. Well, when you're growing up with a PTSD dad, that's the reality you're growing up in.
Yeah, that's tough. And that shapes you because that's the environment you're growing up in.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time. And I'm sure it took you a while before you realize, that must be why, whatever, that I feel a certain way about certain things because that's how I grew up, I was in a similar situation, not with a PTSD dad, but my parents were both were intellectuals. I mean, my mom's still alive, my dad's not, but so it was always, there wasn't a whole lot of affection being shown. It was all intellectual debate and discussion.
Yes.
And like my wife and I bang heads sometimes now because, I debate her or I'll say something or I don't agree with her. And she's like, why do you have to disagree? And I'm like, I'm not trying to disagree, but if I think I'm right, and, when two people both think they're right on principle, I mean, you're both right? There's no way to sort of change that. But I can relate to what you're saying because, I mean, my father was a doctor of philosophy.
Oh,
okay. And a teacher. He taught Greek and Latin.
Uh-huh.
And so, very, very brilliant man and, very high intelligence.
Uh-huh.
And my mom is a librarian. So I read books. I probably read 1,000 books by the time I was out of 8th grade,
I bet.
because my mom would come home at the end of the, the school year with a stack of books, this high saying, oh, here's your summer reading. And I was like, oh, okay. And take book one and boom. And I read all the time. And so it's interesting because that environment, shaped my life and how I am. My wife's always telling me, why can't you be more romantic? It's like, I try, but it usually backfires. Every once in a while, I'll get it right, but it's like I didn't grow up with like watching like a father who was a romantic, romancing my mother every day. It's just, it just wasn't how it is. So it's kind of like the same situation, right? That every single one of us is in. We are the product of our upbringing up to a certain point until we get to a point and say, now I understand why I do the things I do or why I act the way I do, because it takes that internal reflection.
It does.
And if we never do it, we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're doing a disservice to the people around us. But, at the end of the day, you're number one. Nobody's going to look out for you but you. So you need to get in touch with the things that have shaped you and made you who you are so that you can learn from that.
That's right.
And end up being a better person.
Yeah. And I am such a better person than I ever was. And I always thought I was just fine. But it's so good to be on the other side because stuff doesn't bug me anymore. Things can go sideways and I'm just like, what are 3 options that I can do to rectify this situation? If I can't do it, who else can, and running down those things and just becoming unflappable. I tell my clients that she who breathes the slowest wins. It's so
it keeps you calm. It keeps you calm. So what is the controversial point of view you have? You sent something over about that. I want to know what your controversial point of view is.
So my controversial point of view is that we all own what happens to us, because we have a part in that.
Okay. As opposed to blaming someone else, it's all on you.
No,
it's all on me. It's all on each one of us.
No, I'm not doing the good, bad binary. That is useless.
Okay.
It's that we each have a part in it. We play a part. Shakespeare said, he had some grandiose Shakespearean expression for, all the world's a stage and the men and women are but players on the stage. We all have our part in the play. And the only part that you have positive control over is you. And, telling other people what to do, or blaming them or shaming them in some way doesn't make your situation, it doesn't recover your situation, but reflecting on what happened and what you could notice sooner, reflecting on what happened and reflecting on your thoughts that led up to the way you responded, and asking yourself, what is a way that I can do two things? This is like gold here. What can I do to respect the person in front of me? And what can I do that prevents me from showing up as weak? Because game respects game. Game knows game.
Very
if somebody
good.
else is being a jerk to you, you want to come back in strength, but not being a jerk. You want to step up.
Because it shows you're the bigger person.
It
And
does.
if you can do that without bashing them too bad, then they'll
Yeah.
hopefully respect you for it.
Yeah.
Right. And typically they will, depending on the situation. And, there's 100, different scenarios that
A lot
you can
of
play
variables,
on,
but it's the percentage bet. I have never had it fail, except for in the very difficult marriage where nothing worked. And it turned out that the best solution was what we ended up settling on. And we're all much happier now.
That's awesome. Well, I'm good. I'm glad that you're much happier now, right?
Happy is worth having.
Absolutely. A couple more things before we wrap here. If you could explain the pain, the hope, and the solution as you see it.
The pain of not having good boundaries is having that that experience time after time after time of people blowing past your boundaries. They will do that anyway. But your reaction is to be back on your heels and feeling like, I didn't see that coming. I don't know what to do. They are so mean. Putting yourself in that like I've been attacked space, and whether or not that's true, it's not a personally powerful perspective for any of us to take, and to be able to stand up in a way that you are being absolutely strong without being that jerk, that blamer, that shamer, and then redirect right into the situation at hand. And honestly, you can do this with just a single word. So I'll give you an example on this. I'm walking out of the grocery store. There's a little corner where some of the grocery workers will go over and smoke a cigarette on break or whatever. Mm-hmm. And sometimes some kind of drifter people will be in that spot as well. So, and they can look a little unkept, right? So I'm walking past that because I have to go to the store, 2 doors down. And there are 2 guys that are looking rather unkept. And I just look at them and say one word, gentlemen. And they behave that way. They responded like gentlemen would respond. So language, the point of language is to send your listener's mind into a place that is useful and honorable for you and them.
Well put. I like that.
And learning how to craft your language in a way that conveys that, because the words are one thing, but the energy and the tone, that's like the big piece.
Absolutely. It's like when if you say to your dog, like it doesn't matter the words you say, but if you say like, hey, how you doing? Right. The dog gets all crazy. You could be saying, to the dog, you're the dumbest dog in the world. And the dog's like, yeah. Right. But so that tone of voice, right. It means a lot. So, we have the words obviously, which mean a certain thing, but then the way we say it. And then of course, if it's appropriate to the situation. And so this is something that obviously it takes a little practice, people aren't going to be perfect at this all the time, but with practice and with what taking to heart what we've been talking about here, I think people can begin to maybe open up doors that maybe weren't open before or able to be opened, or maybe open them a little bit further, and also be able to recognize some things that they can use to help maybe diffuse some situations, maybe to be able to deflect some things so that they are, they end up being a much more positive end result than you may have originally thought of. Because at the end of the day, like you said, we all think that, we can do no wrong, that, that we're the most important person, et cetera, but we have to learn to get along with each other. And by having that mutual respect and being able to initiate the ability for others to respect us more based on our actions and how we're treating them with respect, 99 times out of 100, that's going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally going to work, and to be gentle with yourself, to allow your human frailties, your human failings to exist within your conception of yourself in the world, because we all have them. We don't live on planet perfect. We live on planet Earth.
That's right.
So be gentle with yourself when you notice, and be grateful when you notice those things that you could do better. That's the first step.
Awesome. So we're gonna end with a couple of things here. So what is I'm gonna say the number one thing that women must know about empowering themselves?
That you are more powerful than you ever thought. You're totally more powerful than you think.
Excellent. Because I can't give that perspective because I'm not a woman. So, thank you for that.
So differently, that that socialization, that focus on appearance, and appearance is nice. You're a handsome man. I'm sure that you don't do all the stuff that we do, and you still look just fine. But we have this whole kind of space around having to be so perfect, and perfect is kind of like the sucker prize.
And it is unfair, I think, because there is a certain, not a stigma, but a certain sort of way that women are viewed, right? That they need to do certain things, they need to act a certain way, and all of it. I don't know how you guys do it, quite frankly, because it's too much. I said to my wife all the time, like, I don't know how you guys do it, because it's difficult. You have to, especially in fields that you've been in, where it's mostly male dominated, it is even more difficult. So for women out there that are in some sort of profession that is dominated by mostly, men, professional men, whatever, it's tough. It's tough. And you have to find that middle ground, and you have to let them, gain that respect for you through how you act towards them. And hopefully at the end of the day, they are all on board, and everybody's focused on the end result, which is making a successful business or solution to a problem, or whatever that happens to be. Because yep, and it's different for all of us. So
it really is. Yeah.
Well, if people are interested in learning more about you, where can our listeners go to learn more, Dorothy?
Well, surprisingly, it's at dorothykuhn.com/gift. So should I spell that? You wouldn't get
Dorothy, the traditional spelling, Dorothy. Last name is Kuhn, Kuhn. .com/gift. And her gift is the 9 early signs you must stop to stop insults and bullying and harassment and worse.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So and I do trainings almost every week in our Facebook group, and so hop on the list and you'll get the link to the Facebook group. It's all good. It's a wonderful community of mostly women and some good men, because these principles apply to everybody, but mostly women like to learn them from women. And guess who I learned them from? Men.
Men. Interesting. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and thanks for being on Safety Talk, Dorothy. And thanks, of course, to our listeners. for tuning in. And you can always get more information, past episodes, and learn about the latest safety news and information at safetytalkpodcast.com. All right, Dorothy, you have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Pete.